What if the most forbidden love story of the Ottoman Empire was never between a sultan and his queen, but between two boys hidden behind golden walls? What if history wasn't written in ink, but whispered through marble corridors between silken curtains beneath golden domes that shimmered not with holiness, but with secrets too dangerous to speak? Behind the glittering grandeur of the Ottoman Empire, the soaring minarets, the lush gardens, the delicate calligraphy brushed across palace walls, there existed another world, one not taught in schoolbooks, one that no museum would dare display. It was a world hidden behind silence and seduction, where power didn't always roar, it purred, where beauty was more than admiration, it was currency. This is not a scandal. This is not fiction. This is the untold truth about the male concubines of the Ottoman Empire, the Yamaks. Young boys, some barely 12, chosen for their elegance, trained for their charm, and adored for their ability to please in ways no history teacher ever dared explain. They weren't guards. They weren't scholars. They were living luxuries, symbols of status caught between love and control. And today we're going to unbury what time, shame, and empire tried to erase. If you think you know the Ottoman Empire, think again. Because in the shadows of every golden age, there's a story it never wanted you to find. This is history's most seductive secret, and once you hear it, you'll never look at power, love, or legacy the same way again. Behind every empire is a performance, and no stage was more lavish, more seductive, or more silent than the palaces of Ottoman Istanbul. The Ottoman Empire projected strength through swords and strategy, but inside its walls it wielded another kind of power, the power of beauty. Not the beauty of queens, but of boys. They were called Yamaks, male concubines, who walked the line between adoration and imprisonment. They didn't fight wars, but they won attention. They didn't lead armies, but they ruled hearts. They were trained not just to serve, but to entrance. Selected for their grace, their charm, their soft features, and silent obedience, Yamaks were plucked from obscurity and transformed into living ornaments gliding through palace halls like whispers of forbidden dreams. But make no mistake, this was not freedom. Every smile was measured, every gesture rehearsed, every silk robe sewn to fit a cage. They were taught poetry, music, politics, and the rules no one dared say aloud: how to please, how to yield, how to survive under the weight of desire. These weren't just boys, they were branding. They were political tools dressed in velvet and gold. According to Venetian diplomat Benedetto Ramberti, as many as 500 boys aged 8 to 20 lived behind the palace walls, chosen from every corner of the empire. Some were sold by poor families chasing hope. Others were prisoners of conquest. But once inside, their pasts were erased. Their names changed, their futures rewritten. And to the outside world, they were the ultimate symbol of elite masculinity. Not because they conquered, but because they were beautiful enough to be conquered. They weren't hidden in shame. They were displayed in silence. And in a world where power was measured not only in bloodlines but in body lines, the Yamak wasn't a servant. He was a statement. Not every story in the palace was gilded. Some bled quietly behind velvet drapes. Enter Tahir and Tib, two boys, young, Ottoman, and beautiful, captured by Christian noblemen during one of the empire's brutal conflicts. You'd expect chains, torture, silence. But what happened next defied every law of conquest. Their captors fell in love. What began as possession became obsession. What began in captivity became connection. These boys, once seen as spoils of war, were now cherished, given gifts, treated like companions, perhaps even equals. And for a moment, in a world built on hierarchy and faith, something radical happened. Love slipped through the cracks of empire. But empires don't tolerate cracks. Neither the Christian courts nor the Muslim ones could allow such a story to survive. Their bond was branded as perversion. Their affection became evidence. Their bodies, once desired, now condemned. They were adored like gods, until they dared to love like men. The noblemen were imprisoned for their feelings. Tahir and Tib were left behind, abandoned to shame. But they didn't run. They didn't forget. They waited. And when their lovers escaped, something unthinkable happened. The noblemen converted to Islam, not for salvation, not for politics, but for love. and so began their desperate journey to be reunited in a world that punished devotion as if it were treason. They didn't switch religions. They switched realities just for the chance to be together. This wasn't just rebellion. It was resistance. It was a refusal to let borders, empires, or gods decide who they could hold at night. But in a world tightening its grip around morality, their love became a ghost flickering in memory, censored in story, buried by law. They survived captivity, but they couldn't survive history. It all began to unravel, not with a war, not with a revolution, but with a handshake. The Ottomans opened their gates to diplomacy, and the West walked in, not just with maps and railways, but with morality. A new kind of invasion, quieter, colder, wrapped in the language of progress. With it came a shift in how love was seen, how bodies were judged, how silence turned into shame. The world of the Yamaks, once whispered about in poetry and immortalized in miniature paintings, was about to be erased systematically, legally, and violently. In 1858, the Ottoman Penal Code was introduced, mimicking Western laws that criminalized public indecency. But everyone knew what it really meant, a quiet war against affection between men. Suddenly, what was once displayed in royal courts was now chased through back alleys. Men suspected of same-sex desire weren't just arrested, they were beaten in public, shaved bald as symbols of humiliation, and in some cases sexually assaulted by the very guards who claimed to uphold decency. It wasn't morality, it was theater, and shame was the script. Pacing quickened. Tolerance collapsed. The Yamaks, once stars of the imperial court, vanished like forbidden verses torn from history's pages. No more poems. No more portraits. No more names. Love hadn't changed, but the world around it had turned to stone. Ahmed Cevdet Pasha, a high-ranking Ottoman official, would later write in sorrow, "Woman lovers have increased while boy beloveds have disappeared. It is as if the people of Lot have been swallowed by the earth. They didn't die. They were erased by law, by fear, and by silence." And just like that, the age of the male beloved, of beauty, devotion, and dangerous intimacy was buried beneath the weight of someone else's morality. So, was this world a symbol of sophistication? Or a tragedy dressed in silk? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the question history tried to bury. Because the Yamaks were not myth. They were men boys, even caught in the quiet war between admiration and erasure. They were adored until they were inconvenient, celebrated until they got too close, painted into beauty, then painted out of history. They weren't forgotten. They were edited out. They existed in songs and diaries, in longing glances behind lattice screens. And then one by one their names disappeared, their portraits removed, their stories rewritten or silenced altogether. Because power never erases the past with fire, it uses shame. And shame doesn't just hide what happened. It teaches us not to ask. But the truth leaves fingerprints. In the architecture. In the poems never recited again. In the cracks of the marble where whispers once lived. And in the story of Tahir and Tib, two boys who refused to bow. Who defied empire, religion, and custom just to feel something that empires feared more than rebellion, love without permission. They didn't just resist their fate. They rewrote what it meant to love inside a golden cage. And that's why we tell this story now, not to scandalize, not to romanticize, but to remember, to reclaim a world that was made invisible, to ask why history only lets certain kinds of love survive. Because if we only remember the conquerors, we forget who paid the price for their power. This is not just about the Ottoman Empire, it's about how every empire chooses what to keep and what to bury. And today we're unburying it one forbidden truth at a time. So if you want more stories they never taught you in school, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share this with someone who still believes history is only written in textbooks. Because the past, it's not dead. It's just hidden. History isn't just what happened. It's what survived. And sometimes what survives isn't truth, it's censorship in disguise. The story of the Yamaks of Tahir and Tib, of a world where love was once art and later turned into evidence. It forces us to ask the hardest question of all. What else did they erase? If love can be rewritten, so can anything. And maybe that's why you're still here, because deep down you know history never tells the whole story, especially when that story threatens the image of empires or challenges the morality we were raised to accept. Maybe you're here because you've felt it too, the silence where a truth should have been, the ache of something important, missing. This isn't about the past. It's about everything we're still too afraid to name today. So don't let this video be just another secret you scroll past. Leave a comment. Tell us what shocked you, what made you feel what you think we've been taught to forget. Save this video because stories like these don't survive unless we hold on to them. And subscribe, not for content, but for truth. For every whispered name, every vanished painting, every love story that deserved to be remembered. Because the real power, it's not in the empire that silences. It's in the voices that choose to speak anyway.